Alright, set review time continues. We are on today to the Wind set review for Beyond Destiny, and we're starting on things off with a monster. So Evil Weapon, 1 CP, Mobius 11, Job Evil Weapon. Tap, sacrifice it, choose a forward, deal it 4,000, and gain a crystal. So this is interesting, right? As I said while we're talking about Cyan, crystals are generally valued at about 1.5 CP as long as you can find a use for them. So in that scenario, then you're getting kind of a like you lose the card in hand, but like a 4K can like round up a little bit of damage. 1 CP is like the right cost. Like you could search this off of a stilt skin. But there's not a lot of reasons to be playing crystals in Wind. The only one I can think of is the Dissidia stuff. But the Dissidia stuff, like, in my opinion, is better off in like Fire Ice and then Splashing Wind. So now we have this weird scenario where you want to like find a use for the crystals, and granted, like maybe you just like use this to get the first crystal, but like if you need your first crystal for like a cane, just to like a decent card, you don't want to wait for Evil Weapon to give you the crystal. I don't know. I don't love it, but I can see potential use cases for it. And like there are combos. Like this pairs very well with the legend of this set that would add another 3,000. Then you have like a 1 CP 7K ping. That seems really decent. It's just a matter of like what in Wind really wants the crystals. And maybe there isn't anything right now. This might be just a good card to know about for the future, to be honest. Up next, we have Vaughn. So we have a full new set of Sky Pirates support this set. And by a full new set of Sky Pirates support, I mean throw all the old Sky Pirates out. This is basically its own thing. So Vaughn is a 7-cost Sky Pirate, 9,000 power, category 12. The cost required to cast Vaughn is reduced by 1 for each Wind character you control. And then when Vaughn enters the field, he has the Luso text. So effectively, this is, if you get deep enough into a Wind game, a free cast Luso with 9,000 power. This is also like a little bit reminiscent of like Ash, or we'll see the Ingus later in this set as like a card that's like a big payoff hero that wants to see very specific character counts and stuff. It's kind of a new thing they're doing with trying to push mono decks. And I don't think, especially with the way Wind functions, it's not difficult to get to 7 characters and make Vaughn completely free. Notably, this does not say cannot become 0. Wind gets to 4 or 5 backups with an Evray and his Homos, and then, he's basically there, at which point he is very, very good, honestly. Every bit of text on this card is good, especially if one of the later engines in the set is actually any good at all. Vaughn will see a whole bunch of play. Vieira. Oh, this card is so crazy. So Vieira says that when Vieira enters the field, 3 CP, job 12, or category 12, standard unit. When Vieira enters the field, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, add 1 to hand, put the other on the bottom of the deck. It's kind of like a worse Loporrit in that, like, Loporrit you drew 2 and then put 1 from your hand on the bottom. This is like only the top 2 cards of your deck. But this is a 1 CP standard unit backup that draws a card. Like, that's not bad at all. Wind especially actually really likes stuff like this. It's a very easy to play, multi-playable standard unit that means that you can kind of increase your backup names without increasing your backup count, which is really, really nice. Wind also has stuff like maybe you draw Fina off those top 2 cards, and you don't want to draw Fina necessarily at that point. You'd rather have it be in deck so you can draw it later. Vieira will also accommodate that. And then also, much like Loporrit, you can pay 1 and tap her to do the same thing again. Again, it's not as good as Loporrit on either effect, but it is 1 cheaper for the break effect. Does that really make a difference? Probably not, right? Like, it's still inferior to her bunny brethren, but I think Loporrit was maybe one of the best cards in the last set, and maybe one of the best backups in the game, bar none. And I think that Vieira honestly has a lot of situational utility that Loporrit doesn't have. One of the biggest ones being is the category 12. This plays very well with a couple of cards from Resurgence of Power in Fran and Kites. let's see, card search. If we go here and we search for Kites, this is actually kind of important. Kites is a card that hasn't gotten a lot of attention lately, but I think Kites offers something unique to Wind that no other deck has, which is when Kites enters the field, you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, you add a Wind card among them to your hand, and return the bottom 3 to your any order. If it is a Category 12 character, also activate Kites. So Kites is a 4 CP backup that could draw a card and activate himself. So he would be the first backup in the game that can consistently come in untapped if we can run enough Category 12 characters. And I think that that's actually doable now because of cards like Vieira. If you watched the matches I played with the Sky Pirates decks, the Vieira engine is very underrated. I think that Jote, Murin, and Fran as a trio of backups with 1 EX burst and just like decent utility on the other two is very slept on. And Vieira fits right in with that. So now, with just those, not even using stuff like Penelo to like help get like your other Sky Pirate backups or anything like that, if you're just running 3 Jotes, 2 Fran, 1 Murin, and 3 Vieira, that's 9 Category 12 characters that Kites can get, and then Kites, if he hits any of those, will activate himself. If you hit Vieira with Kites, that is, you're playing a 3 CP backup on turn 1 on curve, which is wildly good in a deck that wants to get its backups done quickly. I think Vieira is an extremely interesting card for that. I think it's a very good card to buff the Opus 18 Fran. I think actually has a really good chance of success this set, and that's another reason why. Dancer. So Dancer, 4 CP, job standard unit, multiplayable, category 14. Dancer, if you control a job dancer or card named Dancer, the cost required to cast Dancer is reduced by 2. And then when Dancer enters the field, choose 2 characters and activate them. So this is actually, I think, the first good Dancer card we've ever had in Wind. I saw some people saying, like, well, you could just play the standard unit hero instead, and I think this is better than the standard unit hero. So the way Dancers have traditionally played is as a control deck that is entirely dependent on Lilithset, maybe Penelo, but mostly Lilithset and Mayakov. And Lilithset really didn't need good cards to do her thing. Lilithset just needed you to have Dancers on the field to use her effects with. This is a free Dancer. Like, it costs 2 and it activates 2 on entry. I think that's really interesting. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm excited. Dancers is one of those archetypes that I've wanted to be good ever since Lilithset was printed. And they just kind of haven't quite been there, mostly because they want you to play Wind, but there aren't a lot of good Wind Dancers. Like I said, the standard unit that people were saying, like, oh, run that instead, doesn't refund her entry cost. She costs 3, you pay 1 to activate 3, so you lose net 1 CP. This is just strictly better. I don't think the damage 3 text on this Dancer hero is enough to overtake the fact that this is just always a free forward that costs 2 CP. So if Dancers is good, you're probably going to have to run 3 of this card in there, for better or worse. Princess Goblin. Wind got a lot of really good cards this set. I've been like building Wind and building Wind and building Wind. It's been kind of funny because me and my playtest group have 2 really big Wind builders, and we're like having to like hold ourselves back from just running mono Wind at each other over and over and over again, trying to like iron out the best way to play Wind. But Princess Goblin. So when Princess Goblin enters the field, you can search for a Warrior of Light or a Princess Sarah, add to hand. She's Waff, job Goblin. This card is great. The job is relevant because this is now another Goblin backup that the Opus 17 Goblin can search. Also, there is a water backup named Verena that searches a Goblin on entry with EX burst. So you could use that to get Princess Goblin, which can then get Princess Sarah. You now have water, wind, and either fire or earth. This is another set of Warrior of Light backup colors you could potentially run, especially if you wanted to run like a Warrior of Light deck with the Goblin engine. Princess Sarah has new implications to set as well. There's another Princess Sarah. If you wanted to use this as like a mono wind backup engine, that's very possible too. And Warrior of Light has a couple of interesting cards. There's a new legend in this set. There's obviously the Opus 19 Legend, but even like the Opus 20 Common is a very, very powerful card. And I think the Dissidia starter Warrior of Light is very good. Like any of these 4 cards, or 5, 6 cards, like I think all of these have situations where they would be very, very strong. I think the Warrior of Light from Opus 8 hero actually has an argument with Vikings that we can get to later for why Vikings might be something worth playing now. This is a really good card in that deck. Similarly, all of these are really, really good. So I think that the search targets for this are just very broad, and it's got a lot of utility. It's a very, very good backup. I would expect to want to get 3 of this in foil. Sid 2. So they're still trying to push Warp in Wind, which is very interesting. Wind has a very, very broad color identity already between reactivation, conditional draw, cast count. But now with Vayne and Sid, they're pushing Warp even more. How so? Well, Sid 2, when he enters the field, you can search for a card with Warp and add it to your hand. Job Engineer, which does matter. And then you can do sap him, sack him to remove a Warp counter from the forward, only during your turn. There's a lot of interesting things that this does. So one thing that it does do is a lot of Warp cards, you really need to guarantee you Warp them turn 1. I'm thinking something like Theodore. Theodore's efficiency drops off massively the longer the game goes. This is a Wind way of searching Theodore. So now you could run 3 Sid 2 and 3 Ezael, and you can pretty much guarantee your Theodore now. This also searches Golbez, which is great for Golbez decks. And this also has potential future implications. Any card that ever has Warp, if they decide to have a set of backups that Warp in, like maybe they're 3 CP backups with Warp 2 for 1, this would be a backup that searches a backup all of a sudden. I think could be really interesting. There's nothing saying a backup can't have Warp. And then the ability to remove a Warp counter, I think, is a lot more specific, but like you still have the ability to break something for something useful. That's not ever bad to have. I kind of wish you could use it on either player's turn, so you could use it to kind of back attack a warping card in a way, but I get why that maybe they're a little scared of you, like your opponent does something and then you warp in a Theodore on their turn. Like, I get it. I don't love the idea, but I get it. So he's interesting. I do kind of wish he says one card that mentions Warp. That way it could search Vayne. The fact that this doesn't search Vayne is a little bit frustrating. That, like, Warp in Wind, like, has the big reason to be warping cards, but also, like, not a really easy way of searching that card. You have to run, like, Lightning at that point. But, like, Lightning's Warp cards outside of Estinian aren't great. Neither are Winds. It's like you really want to be in, like, Ice or Lightning. I guess, like, Lightning has Golbez, but, like, Golbez is a very high deck building requirement. And, like, you see all the issues that start to pop up with this card. Regardless, it is generically good. It will see some play. I just don't really know how much and where. Summoner. Another standard unit from Category 14. 4 CP 5k. When Summoner enters the field, you can search for a Wind Summon and add it to your hand. This is potentially really good. The biggest problem with this is that it's going to be competing for deck space with Izana. Izana searches for Chocobo, which is about the only summon you really want to search in Wind anyway. Most other summons are not, like, as relevant. Like, this can search Azura, and it's like a free card that, like, activates. It's like a free cast or 2 cast at that point. But I don't think that that's as important as just searching Chocobo would be. And for Chocobo, searching Izana probably just does it better because it costs so much less. It also says when you cast a summon, it gains 2,000 power. That's not bad. Like, you pair it with Lulu, your opponent can't block Summoner because then all you have to do is cast any summon and you win the fight. It's not a bad card. It's just probably, like, the wrong element for it. If it cost 3, it would be really interesting as well. Like, you could use it to, like, cycle through things in a similar way as Lulu. It's just barely below the cusp of playability, I think. Princess Sarah. This is our first legend. This is also the box topper. Again, very excited to see all the Stranger of Paradise cards, finally getting printed. So 2 CP backup, Job Princess. The name is very relevant, obviously, as is the job. Princess is, in my opinion, the most complete backup engine in the game, thanks to Sarah. And she has a lot that interacts with those. So let's go over them. So for 0 cost, you can choose a forward Till the end of the turn, it gains this forward cannot be chosen by EX Burst. You can only use this during your main phase and only once per turn. So this is obviously just like good utility. It's a 0-cost action ability with positive benefits. One big theme this set, I guess they finally realized that EX Bursts are kind of a problem. This doesn't necessarily punish your opponent for using EX Burst, but it does at least allow you to not lose the most important forward you control to an EX Burst. Things like, say, like a Fel Thanos or a Tidus, right, where like being chosen by an EX Burst is one of the only efficient ways to remove them. Sarah can actually prevent that from happening, which is, I think, really impactful. It's like good utility. She probably is now the best like wind character to search off of a Sarah, but also like how often are we really going to be doing wind water exactly with Sarah as our engine and not something else is like the real question with Princess Sarah would have there. As a second action ability, you can tap her, discard one Job Princess to choose a forward, and reduce all damage dealt to it, or the next damage dealt to it to 0 instead. This is also really good. One thing about Sarah in particular is that you usually can run a large number of princesses, especially if we're saying just wind water. There's a new Saram Mobius this set. Sarah herself, extra copies of her are effectively dead. You have Hilda in water. You have Fiona is a job princess. There is like a category 11. It's like Claudia, I want to say it is. It's a job princess. There's just so many princesses. You can run a almost mono princess line. Oh, Lena, another card this set, and it's kind of like a pseudo special for any princess. And a 1 CP summon that protects a forward is not a bad effect. I think the big fear here is that you do have to kind of leave her up, which ended up being what made Ovelia so much harder, but this is also so much more generic than Ovelia, right? Like, Ovelia had, like, the revive effect, but you had to telegraph that you had Ovelia, and then, like, Ovelia was a lot harder to get the value of. None of that is true for Princess Sarah. She is in the right element. It's very easy sometimes to just save your Evray for the end of the turn, activate your Princess Sarah to protect your card. And it's not difficult to run princesses, and if it's worth turning a summon in hand into a 1 CP summon that protects your most important forward, then you can do that, which I think is really interesting. So I think she's really good. I think she's really interesting. I think the biggest problem is I just don't see a ready home for her in the same way that I see a lot of other options this set. In particular, there's a new Lena in water that seems very good. But the problem with that now becomes that if you're searching a win target off of Sarah, you actually might go for King Tycoon instead of Sarah. That said, it's nice that you can run this in multiples and feel good about it, because you have this really powerful pseudo special. So I'm excited to experiment with Princess Sarah. I think she has a lot of potential. We will see how good she ends up actually being. Saram Mobius, another backup job princess, 2 CP. You have a tap. All the forwards you control gain 1,000 power until the end of the turn. You can only use this if you control 2 or more job princess. Trivially easy to meet thanks to Sarah. Sarah finds Saram Mobius is 2 or more job princesses. There's no once per turn on this, which means you can actually buff your field quite large in like a Stormy deck that continues to reactivate Saram Mobius. And 1,000 power actually does blank a lot of removal sometimes. Thinking of stuff like how this is, Ice Lightning, but like Ice Lightning for a long time was running Duke Larg specifically to avoid dying to Hecaton Cheer. Maybe there are decks where getting a 1,000 power buff to avoid a specific type of board wipe is going to matter a lot. Similarly, I think that it's just solid utility all the way around. I think it's just a good card. All right. So this is the Stranger Paradise card that I'm most excited about. So this is Sophia. So job is Black Mage. It's not a bad job to have. All the Black Mage support cares about job Black Mage, so you could, in theory, discard this to a Waltz, but I don't imagine that you will, given that none of the other Black Mage support is in Wind. So this is the party member payoff, so this only needs one other character on the field to do it. So one category stop foe forward other than herself. When she enters the field, choose a summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. brilliant. Like, that's really, really good. Lulu is the de facto best card in Wind right now because Lulu is 2 casts for 1 CP, which allows you to really ramp your cast count for a Luso. And Sophia is effectively 3 more copies of Lulu as long as you're willing to have a dark forward in your deck, namely Jack Garland. And Wind would probably play 4 or 5 copies of Lulu if they had access to it. So I think this is really solid, especially when you get into the second part. So Lulu also does have some nice utility for Mono Wind in allowing Mono Wind to deal with big threats by lowering their power to 5,000. Well, if you have Lulu and Sophia on the field, Sophia also says if you cast a summon, you can dull an active stop foe forward you control, includes yourself. When you do so, choose a forward, deal it 5,000 damage. So now, if you have Jack Garland and Lulu in hand, you can go Lulu, get back Chocobo, and then you go tap a backup, play Jack Garland, discard Chocobo, search Sophia, tap a backup, pitch a card, play Sophia, get back Chocobo. You probably got like an It's Almost trigger in there or a Rosa. And you go Chocobo, target Sophia. Lulu makes it forward, go to 5,000 power. Sophia, dull herself, choose the forward that Lulu's going to make 5,000, and then it will just immediately die. That's really good. It gets around a lot of different types of removal. It turns every time you loop Chocobo in the Storm turn into a removal spell, which is really interesting because it also does a lot of kind of funky things. It could, in theory, lower the reliance on cards like Luso. So Wind just gets like a ton of really efficient, powerful removal this set. I think Sophia is really interesting and really powerful. I think there's a lot of things that she can do. The only thing is, how willing are you to run 3 1 CP 9Ks, essentially, to make Sophia work? And I think, honestly, quite a few decks will. I know that like I was on 2 dark cards in my Mono Wind deck when I was playing the Xenoses. I could very easily see myself cutting those slots, going to 3 Jack Garland and 3 Sophia and calling it a day. So, very excited to cook with this card. Easily my favorite of the Stranger Paradise forwards. So, well, one of them actually. There's another one later on that's really exciting too. Tiamat. So this is, again, every Sopfo, or all the Warrior of Light colors got like a party member that like works with Jack and then a mono payoff, which the cool thing is that Jack can still search the mono payoff. So if you're in Mono Wind, you can run Sophia and Tiamat to have a lot of targets for Jack to continue to go, and Jack can also search himself if you ever wanted to. So they all have the same mono payoff of controlling 7 or more characters of their type. And then Tiamat gains cannot be chosen by opponent's summons or abilities, and if it's dealt damage by summons or abilities, the damage becomes 0 instead. Obviously, this is really powerful. I think that a card like Yuri really could warp games around himself in recent formats where some decks just could not deal with a 9K untargetable beat stick. And Tiamat is that, but also doesn't die to cleave. You have to non-targeting, non-damage destroy Tiamat, which is really, really difficult for some decks to do. And then when Tiamat enters the field, choose a character of cost 5 or more, opponent controls, and break it. Obviously, hitting something like a Tyro with this could be very good. Hitting a Shinryu would be very solid as well. If your opponent like board wipes you, you just go like play Tiamat, break that, and then like play any 1-cost thing to make Tiamat untargetable. I think there's a lot of potential for Tiamat, especially if you pair it with something like a No-No so that Tiamat can activate herself. I think the big fear with Tiamat instead is that she is relatively small body-wise, and you can't do... It's very hard to pump her, which might be why something like a Sarah might be really good. Make Tiamat a 9K, and make her just very difficult to deal with and remove. So, yeah, definitely an interesting card. Going to be a pain in the butt for some decks to get over. Nini. So Nini's really good as well. Seen a lot of her in my playtesting with my friend. So this is Nini, 1-cost Artificial Fairy, job FFBE, which is relevant. FFBE does have a Searcher in Wind. When Nini enters the field, look at the top card of your deck. You may place it on the bottom, and then if you cast 3 or more, she is also a Luso. You get to draw. And this is just kind of good utility. So again, Mono Wind in particular does have some cards that it does want to draw early. Think something like a Fina. But also, late game, you don't want to draw backups, right? Nini kind of gives you the ability to play a better Luso. And the nice thing about this is that now, instead of having just Luso for a 1 CP for cast that draws a card, we can now go with cards like Nini or Ritz from last set. And all of these like really interesting, powerful 1 CP forwards, or Vaughn. And we can kind of cascade through our deck to get our Luso turn to be even more efficient and more powerful. Nini really does help make that a lot easier. So I expect to see her at least as a 1-of in most mono win lists, especially early. I don't imagine she'll get too much higher than 1 or 2 of, but she is very, very good. Balthier. So here is the other mono win, or not mono win, the other win legend. And Balthier is really, really cool. So Balthier is a 4 CP category 12 Sky Pirate. All this is great. Plays well with Fran, plays well with the aforementioned kites. When Balthier or a wind character enters your field, choose a forward opponent controls, deal it 3,000 damage. That's really good text. Wind, obviously, is very good at swarming the field, bouncing its own characters, playing a lot of them. That is characters, so backups, monsters. Does not matter. Balthier will get a ping off of it. Turning all of those into removal on top of just being increased casts is very good. It also has the ability to discard a Job Sky Pirate, activate all the characters you control, and you can do it once per turn. That's fine. There are a lot of extra Sky Pirate backups. You could run things like Vaughn, which you could then search with Pandemonium. It's very possible to go Azura to add back a Sky Pirate, which then allows you to, I mean, you kind of do the Azura thing anyway, but like, it is something you can do. And it's all characters, so if you run this with like a Bismarck, you could like dole them all, and then like Balthier do this, reactivate them, and then ping everything off again. I think this gives a lot of situational utility to a card like Ritz from last set. Ritz was 1 CP, enter, do 3k, and then if it dies, draw a card. If you go Balthier Ritz, you do 9k to a forward, and then draw when it dies. That seems very good. And honestly, I really like the way that they're trying to push Wind this set. So, if you'll indulge me for a little bit, one of the big things about Wind since the printing of Luso was that Wind would congeal around just the most powerful, efficient cast cards, which is fine. Like, that's a valid way to play, but it's also like really frustrating to play against, to the point where like I would play a lot less mono Wind at locals than I would play other decks that I find fun, just because people would get very frustrated playing against it. And what the weird thing about that is, though, is they can't stop printing Wind cards, right? So either they have to identity shift Wind in a way that's more powerful than just turboing into Luso, which, I mean, power creep is a thing, or they have to find ways of enabling that playstyle behind an archetypal payload. And I think Balthier and the Sky Pirate that support this set does a decent job of trying to corral those casts into something resembling an archetype, rather than just being this like slurry of cards that ramp 5 backups as quickly as possible and then just try to cast Luso 18 times over the next 2 turns, right? So I'm really excited for Balthier and what he represents. I think it's a very smart way to design Wind cards going forward. It fixes a lot of the issues Wind has. Wind has needed more consistent, powerful, and faster removal than cards like Fat Chocobo provided. It just remains to be seen if this is as good as just turboing into Luso by itself, because Luso, doing the cleave that he does, doesn't need a lot of extra damage or help to deal with the board. So I'm excited to brew with Balthier, but he is definitely not the only way to play Wind going forward, which is cool. Pandemonium. So again, if you've seen one of my previous videos, I get very excited for Hero Summon Cycles. This is another one. This is a Wind 2CP summon, categories Mobius and 8. Select one of the following 2 actions if you've cast 2 cards other than Pandemonium. Really like the phrasing here, because you can't go Pandemonium, Lulu, Pandemonium, and get both, you have to get cards that are not Pandemonium, which I think is actually really interesting. Maybe I could be wrong there. No, actually, no. That's saying that it has to be the third cast. Because it's not card name Pandemonium. Never mind. So you have two options. It's choose a forward of cost 5 or more, deal 8,000 damage, or choose a win forward of 5 or more, add it to your hand. Both of these are solid. Win forward of 5 or more is really nice because it means that you can run one copy of Bismarck and then use Pandemonium to search them out of the deck when it's actually good. And Pandemonium, like Bismarck doesn't have a lot of utility early, and Pandemonium theoretically could. Your opponent could have a big Bungus with slightly less power, or you could have like a Lulu on field, or like Pandemonium Balthier, or Pandemonium Ritz. Just like kind of any other combination of cards can kind of kill a 5 cost for 2 CP, which obviously is a very massive trade up. I think with the new Vaughn being cost 5 or more, there's always a target for the second effect as well, which kind of makes Pandemonium into a bit of a cantrip. And I think we have a recipe for a pretty interesting card, with the big caveat being that Wynn's summons are so good across the board that this is very much competing for space with cards like Dryad, the situational utility of breaking monsters on 4 CP Alexander. You're never going down on 3 CP Chocobo. Just drawing 2 cards off of Alexander. I think there's a lot of potential for Pandemonium, particularly in non-Wynn cast heavy decks. Maybe there is like, Sky Pirates might really have liked something like this as like a utility option that can search an extra copy of Vaughn way back when. I don't know that deck is very good now. Maybe there's like a Wind X deck where it's like you're using this to search for the goddess, right? It's definitely an interesting card. Penelo. So first of all, this is one of my most wanted full arts, just because if you've seen the full art Ash before and the way that the pink pops with the foiling on FFTCG cards, it's just incredible. And I think this is going to be very similar. So Penelo, category 12, 2CP, 5K. Jobs are Dancer and Sky Pirate. Both are fine. Notably, though, Dancer Pirates was a thing that people tried around Opus 15 that never felt as good as just playing pirates by themselves. Penelo has 2 effects. When she enters the field, choose 2 characters. You control 2 or more Sky Pirate forwards, activate them. So she is a free cast if you have another Sky Pirate, so probably the most common one will be Balthier. That's very nice. And when Penelo is put from the field into the break zone, choose a job Sky Pirate of 3 or more, and your break zone, add it to your hand. So this is interesting, right? Obviously a lot of interesting utility here. Choosing 2 characters and activating them on entry means that she can kind of proc a Balthier ping for free. So you go like Balthier into Penelo, and Penelo is going to activate 2 backups. You've done 6K. Play another forwards, another 3K to a forward. You can kind of start clearing boards. Another option that you can do is if you can kill her yourself. Sophia can dull herself and hit any target. You can use her to recur Balthiers or something like a Vaughn and increase your cast count further and further and further. I like the idea of a combo piece that leads to recursion. One of the biggest things that people underrated about Category 6 was that if you board wipe Category 6 sometimes, I remember I was playing against a Category 6 player at Nationals, and I did something to clear the board. I think I did a Stola special, and I spent 3 or 4 to get the Stola into play off of an Alize, and then I used 4 CP to use the special to kind of clear the board. And my opponent had a lot of floating triggers. The Strago went to the break zone and kind of just cycled into the next best card in their deck, right? Penelo being able to do that actually means that if you do end up getting board wiped, those board wipes get less and less and less efficient as they go along. All of a sudden now Shinryu doesn't cost your opponent 6. Shinryu costs your opponent 6 and puts the best Sky Pirate in your break zone back into your hand, whether that's Legend Fran or another copy of Balthier to start clearing the board again, or even just Vaughn to up the cast count again. I think there's a lot of value in that, and I think that that's a very underrated thing for Final Fantasy players, because I think there's a lot of trying to build boards that don't break, but the board breaking tools in the game right now are so potent and so powerful that I think it's just going to happen anyway. And having a combo piece that also now represents recovery, I think, is a criminally slept on part of the game. and Penelo gives access to that. With all that in mind, the 4 CP backup is very, very good too, especially since, again, we were talking about how kites you could search kites with it and then go the next or play the kites, which gets you an active backup, so on and so forth. Just a very, very interesting option as well, but this is not a bad card by any means. Alright, now for the next of the generals. So this is another cycle. You control 2 or more wind characters. Cast required to cast it is reduced by 2. Can't be chosen by abilities, and it can tap to do 4,000 to an opponent's forward. I don't really care too much about this. Like, it's a little hard to choose. It's kind of cheap. Does some like soft ping. It's not once per turn on the ping, so if you can keep activating it with something like a no-no, like you can cleave over and over again. But does that really matter? Does that change the math on the game? Probably not. It's okay, but so here's Fran. Fran is the last of the Sky Pirate support this set. 1 CP forward, job Sky Pirate. Category 12, the card name Balthier you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. And you can pay 1 to play Fran onto the field duel. You can use this ability if a card named Balthier has entered your turn. Field this turn, and Fran is in the break zone. So there's a very easy combo that's intended here. You have 5 backups. You tap 4. You play Balthier. You use Balthier's action ability, discarding Fran to activate your backups. Holding priority then, you use Fran. You pay 1, and you revive Fran onto the field. Fran then comes in as basically kind of a free forward that uses the 1 CP off of the Balthier reactivation that you weren't going to use anyway, and life is good. How often is that actually going to matter or happen? Probably not often enough, to be totally honest. If you want a 1 CP Fran cast, the 2 CP backup Cydia card is 1 CP reduced when you have a Balthier on field. Very easily could see you just doing that and then pitching extra copies of that Fran to the Balthier for activating all your backups again anyway. Obviously, saying Balthier can't be chosen by abilities is nice, but I think Balthier's biggest weakness isn't going to be targeted choosing. It's going to be cards like Hecaton Shear, Shinryu, or Amaterasu, and Fran doesn't help with any of that. So I think in general, this one is just kind of a swing and a miss for me. I get what they're going for, but she just doesn't quite do enough considering how contested Fran is as a name. And of course, the Fran Legend from Opus 18 is still a very good card as well, and will be good with the new Sky Pirate support. Machina. So Machina is we got a lot of Class 0 cadet to support this set. 2 CP forward 5k. And if you control 2 or more Class 0 cadets, Machina gains 3,000 power, haste, and cannot be chosen by summons. And then it has a special, 4 special, and 2 wind to break a forward of cost 5 or more. This is, fine. I like the transition. Something they really pushed this set is this line of text. If you control 2 or more of a card, you see it in a lot of the WAF support as well. And I actually think that's really good because that means the decks that Class 0 cadets and WAF in particular, were kind of built to be these critical mass decks. Another one was Sky Pirates in Opus 15, where it's Sky Pirates were off the charts broken as soon as you got to 6 Sky Pirates on the field, including a Penelo. But that's a really late game thing that just doesn't happen as often anymore. It feels really bad. So you get instead now this really simple utility of okay, just get one other card, play a little bit of an archetypal focus in your deck, but the payoffs are so much easier to get to. Machina's fine. I don't think he's going to see a ton of play, but it's not a bad card by any stretch of the imagination. Will go very well. I think that Class 0 cadets are a very good limited archetype this set in Wind, Lightning, and Wind, Lightning. So, and if you are in Wind, Lightning, then giving yourself a couple Machina in limited will be quite strong. Dragoon. So this is another part of the cycle of kind of fast land backups that we got this set. The big thing here is this is the second Wind Dragoon now. That also gains a crystal. So I said before, it's a little strange that like the Final Fantasy Dragoon doesn't have a super playable card for Dragoons. Like you could play the Amano Opus 15 Legend, and now you have even more ways of doing that. Anytime you can stack a bunch of Dragoon backups as well, if you get to 4 Dragoon backups, then, because you're going to obviously have Alice as one of them, then your Freya Cleave is 8k no matter what happens, which is really, really powerful. And I think there's like a lot of like potential for like this like Wind Lightning or like Lightning Wind Dragoon package to actually be very good. That's pretty much it though. Like, I don't love these backups otherwise. I think they're just kind of interesting. I believe this is the last one. This is Riku. 2 CP EX Burst. When she enters the field, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's Wind, add it to your hand. Damage 3. Riku gains 2,000 power. She's just solid. She's only going to show up in like a mono Wind deck. You can't be on the Jack Garland stuff because if the top card of your deck isn't Wind, then it'll be a whiff. But she is a free 2 CP card that draws on entry and then like is like decent over time. There's clearly value in that. Wind is hurting for very good EX burst. Riku has that as well going for her. And I think that I would not be surprised to see like mono Wind run like 1 Riku, 1 Nini, and then like, or 1 Riku, 1 Nini, and 1 Ritz like as a one of each as like their like low cost cards that like each draw a card under different circumstances, like to kind of get their cast count going, or like Riku's a very good way to start your cast chain, right? 2 CP, top card of your deck, add it to hand. Okay, now we keep going. So she's solid, and that is it. So next time we will have Earth. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.